some of the reasons that they identified as reasons why businesses will stop referring or fire a firm. And so, like, for example, one of their biggest reasons was that they said that not being able to work with real-time data was a big driver in why clients would then turn around and let go of an accounting firm. And that makes sense because obviously we're going to this age where everything is in the cloud, everything's real time and whatnot. But I just didn't foresee that that would be one of the top reasons at this point that somebody would fire an accounting firm. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think, it depends on what industry you're in. There's industries that move slower to adopt kind of real-time metrics, and there's some industries that real time doesn't mean much, especially like if you're talking about like huge contracts that take months or years to do that.
Yeah.
Does the urgency of real-time financials really matter for that? If you're like a one big project a year kind of company, whatever that is, then maybe real-time financial, like up to date, you can do it on a spreadsheet or whatever. You're much more concerned about other metrics that you're meeting. So
yeah, and I think it depends on what they mean by real-time data. I think where that question came up, and it was like this category of questions they asked in this study, which, any study like this is, even if the data is pretty robust, it's skewed by the type of question that's asked and the way it's framed, right? And so they had this category of questions that was in, that was really a lot about technology related type stuff, which makes sense because of the business that Bill.com is in. And so the context of it is interesting to think about where the context of that question is coming from, and then also the context that the people who answered it might have been taking it from, right? Because I think about it, in a traditional accounting firm, there's not a lot of integration between the accounting firm and the client, right? And so if you're doing like traditional work, whether it's tax or audit, the client has data in their files. They then bring it over to the accounting firm. The accounting firm creates work papers in their files. The client may never even see. The client may, in many cases, never even see the vast majority of the work papers that are in the accounting firm's files, right? And then at some point at the end of an engagement, like at the end of an audit or the end of some kind of assurance engagement, like a compilation or review, or at the end of a tax return engagement, then the firm passes over kind of a work product, right? And so there's this very like. You think about it like in the video game world. You can probably help me out with this in the video game world, right? Because there's this difference between like real-time and turn-based games, right?
Yeah.
Is that the right terminology I'm using, right?
Yep, that's perfect.
Yeah, so it's like, well, most accounting firms are working on a turn-based system, right? Yeah. And I think most traditional services still are, and it's not all that practical that they would be working on a real-time system. I actually, from a tax return standpoint, I don't know many, if any, tax return firms that are working in the small business environment that actually work with real-time systems. Their big four firms were actually doing this. So like something I found out that was surprising to me but made sense later is that if you were like, let's say that you were Disney or AOL, well, AOL Time Warner is not a big thing anymore, but it was back in the day when I found out this. But let's say you were, let's say we'll stick
You're
with
dating
Disney.
yourself there, bro.
Yeah. Let's say you were Disney, right? So you're this big company, right? And you have a huge accounting department and a tax department in your own right. Like your tax department is probably bigger than a lot of small accounting firms by itself, right? If you're Disney, right? And then you work with some accounting firm, presumably a big four international firm, who's doing your tax returns. It turns out that when the big four for a long time now, I would say over a decade, when they've been doing work with these really big companies, they actually do have real-time sharing information because there's a layer of collaboration between the inside tax department of large companies and the tax return tax return preparers in the outside accounting firms. So where that collaboration actually exists, the people have been doing that. That technology has been there. But I think my guess is that the context of this kind of question has more to do with accounting firms that are doing more outsourced accounting or bookkeeping or what they call client accounting services, and so that they're actually managing the client's kind of daily operational accounting data on a real-time basis, which means that having it available to the client in real time would be super important, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's probably the context that they were asking the question, and also the context that most people would be answering it. I doubt the context is that they're asking their auditors to provide real-time access to work papers as they're working on the audit. What would the point of that be, right?
Yeah.
Well, it does happen in audit though. Like when you're talking Big Four like that, and you have to do like a publicly traded company, there is live data sharing that goes on for control testing and like expenditure testing and stuff that happens, throughout the year. Like Deloitte has somebody at like Nike or one of those type companies, like every day, 12 months a year. They have somebody there that is reviewing data, doing those quarterly tests to make sure that the system's still working correctly.
Well, that goes back to something I've said before. It's like sometimes you've got tools trying to drive the use cases, whereas, it turns out where the use cases are clear and there's a high level of collaboration because you've got experts on both sides of the table, this is already being done. Right.
Yeah,
but it's like, I mean, how much real-time data do you need if there's actually nobody in the company to make use of that real-time data anyway? It would be one of those issues. I think when it comes to like the outsourced accounting piece, like for us, in our service delivery model, it's not like we don't need a special technology to do this because we're working inside the company. We're using their systems. So we're using their file drive, their share drives, their systems, and we're doing the work on their behalf in their system. So it's always available to them. And so yeah, I mean, I think, and so maybe in that way, we're checking that box. We're keeping data available in real time for clients and that's making them happy.
One thing that I think about is like, so I specialize, or I niche, I guess, in nonprofit. And one thing that a lot of nonprofits are a bit like accounting firms, are really slow adopters of like new technology. And so one thing I noticed with them is they hear about the innovations that go on in the for-profit world where like, wow, you have like a real-time like online, like look at your bank account. Like we want that. But a lot of people don't offer that kind of service. And for sure the accounting firms are traditional accounting firms, I should say, are very slow to adopt any kind of new business model. It's one of the reasons why you opened up TCA, and then we did a contract accounting service. Yeah, because there was really no players in the market that were doing something like that, and we saw an opportunity to do something like that. Yeah. But I feel like that's really the way that accounting firms are probably going to shift. Tax and audit will always be there in some function, but with AI and all this online stuff, you're going to shift away from like a bookkeeper, even maybe internal, like, what I call busy work staff, like an AP person or an AR person or an expense person or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's going to move away from that, and you're going to be left with middle to upper kind of level jobs for those kind of positions. Mm-hmm.